These are the first 10 seconds of freedom after 15 years of incarceration. And this is the 300th second. He's back in handcuffs. The same man, the same place, but he's already being led back by the same guards. It's mind-boggling to think that the greatest gift, freedom, could be destroyed in just 5 minutes. In this video, we'll break down 3 hidden psychological viruses that drive people to run back to prison. And the last one explains even the most irrational actions. This isn't stupidity, and it's not insanity. Behind this absurd act lies a terrifying but understandable logic, a logic accessible only to those who have been through the system. We're used to thinking of freedom as the ultimate value. For some, it becomes an unbearable torture. According to the U.S. Bureau of Justice statistics, about 44% of former inmates are rearrested within the first year. That's nearly 1 in 2. An entire stadium of people given a chance, only to stumble just a few feet from the starting line. This story isn't just an oddity. It's a diagnosis of the entire system. By the end of this video, you will understand, prison isn't just a building, it's a program installed in the brain. It's like a virus in the firmware, replacing the factory settings of freedom and choice with prison patches like submission and routine. And we'll show how it can be removed using special antivirus programs of social rehabilitation. The first virus is called institutionalization. It's a scientific term for a simple phenomenon. The brain, accustomed to a cage, forgets how to live in an open field. This idea was formulated by sociologist Irving Goffman, who studied total institutions, prisons, barracks, and closed boarding schools. He found that their main goal isn't rehabilitation, but a complete reprogramming of the personality to fit the system's needs. As a result, the freedom of choice isn't joyful, it's paralyzing. Imagine a deep-sea fish, accustomed to colossal water pressure. If you suddenly bring it to the surface, it won't rejoice in its freedom. It will literally explode from the inside. Scientists call this barotrauma, a physical collapse from a rapid change in pressure. What happens to a former inmate's psyche is a psychological barotrauma. Their inner world can't withstand the pressure of freedom. He walks into a supermarket and freezes up. Dozens of types of bread, cheese, juice. For 15 years, others decided what he would eat, when he would sleep, what he would do. Now, every decision is a micro-stressor. Psychologists call this the paralysis of choice. As Professor Sheena Iyengar showed in her famous jam experiment, too much choice can overwhelm even an ordinary person. For someone who hasn't made a choice in 15 years, it becomes genuine torture. This stress accumulates and within hours can turn into a panic attack. Against this backdrop, prison seems like a safe, predictable place. Now, a simple exercise. Remember your first day at a new job or in a new city. That feeling of being lost? Multiply that by 1,000 and imagine you've forgotten the basic rules of the game. How to pay with a card, how to use a smartphone, how to simply talk to a stranger. It's like being woken up from a 10-year coma and immediately sent to take a quantum physics exam in a foreign language. The world is the same, but you're an alien in it. Fear and panic are powerful factors, but they don't explain cases where a crime is committed coldly, almost with a sense of relief. What if returning to prison isn't an emotional breakdown, but a business plan? In American criminology, there's a cynical expression, 3 hots and a cot. This is what prison guarantees, and freedom does not. For some, it becomes the only available social benefits package, the worst business plan in the world. This plan is built on brutal arithmetic. In prison, you have 3 yeses, a roof, food, and minimal security. On the outside, you face 3 no home, no job, and no one. Upon release, an inmate is given what's called gate money. The amount is ridiculously small, sometimes less than $100. That's not even enough for a couple of nights in the cheapest motel. For a person with no support system, the choice between starving on the street and a bunk in a cell becomes terrifyingly logical. This leads to these strange, almost theatrical crimes: smashing a store window in front of a patrol car, stealing a can of beer and sitting on the curb, waiting to be arrested. This isn't a criminal mastermind, it's a performance of despair. Criminologists call this the opposite of suicide by cop. The person isn't provoking an officer to shoot them, they are provoking the system to re-adopt them. It's a cry for help that the system only understands in the language of the penal code. For a police officer or a prison guard, there's no mystery here. They see this person, they know them. Sometimes, they were the ones who released them that very morning. In their lexicon, there's even an informal term, flippers, those who flip and come right back. For a guard, it just means they'll have to fill out the same intake paperwork they just completed. For the release, an absurdity that has become a bureaucratic norm. They don't see a criminal. They see a person who the system has ground up and spit out. And now, he's just crawling back into the jaws of the machine because he knows no other home. Okay, fear and cold calculation are understandable. But how do you explain a case where a person gets out with money, housing, and family support, yet still smashes the window of a patrol car an hour later? Here, the simple logic of survival is powerless. We have to look deeper, straight into the brain, into the prefrontal cortex. This is the CEO of our consciousness. And we'll see how years of confinement turn this strict executive into an impulsive teenager, a teenager who floors the gas without even knowing where the brake pedal is. Here, we must look at what prison has done to the brain on a chemical level. And this chemistry, it's not about substances, it's about the wiring. It's about the neural pathways in the prefrontal cortex. Responsible for planning, impulse control, and assessing consequences. In prison, where your every step is scheduled for years ahead, this part of the brain simply isn't needed. It atrophies, like a muscle that isn't used. This isn't just a pretty metaphor. Studies using fMRI scans show a real decrease in activity in this area in people after long-term incarceration. The neural pathways responsible for complex planning literally become overgrown. A person is released into freedom with a physically disabled braking system. Imagine you've spent 10 years driving a car where an instructor handled the braking for you. And now you're dropped onto a highway and the brake pedal simply doesn't work. And it's not just that the pedal is broken. All the warning lights on the dashboard are off too. The brain not only can't stop, but it doesn't even receive a signal that it's hurtling toward a disaster. Any minor irritant, a sideways glance, a loud noise, can trigger an inappropriate, explosive reaction. The brain is simply unable to calculate its consequences. This is a prison reflex breaking through into the real world. In prison, you have to respond to aggression with immediate aggression, or you'll be broken. On the street, this same reflex leads to an immediate arrest. Psychologists call this a maladaptive survival mechanism. What helped you survive in one environment becomes toxic in another. It's like wearing a spacesuit in the jungle. It protected you in space, but here, it will kill you. The person acts not because they want to, but because their body and brain are programmed for the only response they know. Let's rate these 3 viruses on a sabotage scale. First, the passenger's panic or fear, 6 out of 10. Second, the calculator of despair or hopelessness, 8 out of 10. And third, the snapped cable or pure impulse, 10 out of 10. Because a person can overcome fear, they can find a way out of hopelessness, but they cannot command their brain to suddenly switch on if it has been in sleep mode for years. Theory is one thing, but to truly understand how these 3 forces converge at a single point and detonate a person's life, you need to live those 5 minutes with them. Let's meet Shane McGraw, whose freedom lasted just long enough to walk to the nearest store. He was imprisoned for armed robbery at 19 and returned to prison 5 minutes later for stealing a $1 can of Coke. This is the story of how a man's life was devalued to the price of a soda. Shane McGraw had a plan, a ridiculously simple one. He had a sister waiting for him. He had some small savings, and he had a dream. To get to his sister's house, eat her lasagna, which he hadn't tasted in 15 years, and get a job at an auto repair shop. No yachts or castles, just lasagna. On paper, he had everything he needed to stay out. But reality hit him like a sonic boom. The noise of the cars was deafening. Bright signs burned his retinas. People around him moved too fast, spoke too loudly, their faces were too close. This is classic sensory overload. His brain, accustomed to the gray colors and monotonous hum of a prison block, was like an old tube television that had just been plugged into a fiber optic cable. The processor simply burned out. He felt vulnerable, alien. The simple plan in his head began to crumble under the pressure of millions of stimuli. He went into a store to buy water, just water. But the self-checkout machine looked like the control panel of a spaceship. A security guard looked at him with suspicion, and in that moment, all three viruses converged at a single point. The passenger's panic ignited. He realized he couldn't cope, that he didn't belong in this world. The calculator of despair kicked in. A thought, which he would later repeat to psychologists, echoed in his mind. I don't know how to live out here, but I know exactly how to survive in there. And then the snapped cable gave way. He grabbed a can of Coke and walked toward the exit. His brain wasn't evaluating the consequences. It was simply executing a command. End this torture. He didn't run. He didn't resist. He just waited. When the handcuffs clicked on his wrists, there was no fear on his face. There was relief. A prison psychologist would later describe it this way. For him, the click of handcuffs wasn't the sound of freedom ending. It was the sound of order returning to his universe. The chaos was over. He was going home. This tragedy is built into the very architecture of the system. It operates like an on-off switch. Yesterday you were under total control. Today you're in total chaos. There's no buffer zone, no decompression. It's like forcing an astronaut who spent a year in zero gravity to run a marathon the day they land. They need slow gravitational therapy, not a shock to their system. And such decompression chambers for the psyche do exist. They are gradual adaptation programs like halfway houses, where former inmates live under partial supervision, relearning everyday tasks, restoring documents, and rebuilding social skills. The gold standard for such a system is the Norwegian prison on Bastøy Island. There, inmates live in conditions that closely resemble freedom, preparing them for release. The result? Norway's recidivism rate is around 20%. Compare that to 40% or even 60% in the US and Russia. This isn't a miracle. It's a technology. A technology that allows the brain to slowly acclimate to the pressures of a new world. These programs attack all three viruses simultaneously. They provide freedom in controlled doses, preventing institutional panic. They offer housing and job assistance, pulling the rug out from under the calculator of despair. And most importantly, they force the prefrontal cortex to start working again, making daily decisions in a safe environment. In essence, it's a reinstallation disk for the consciousness. It doesn't just erase the prison virus, it slowly, step by step, installs the drivers for a new operating system called freedom. So the self-destruct code consists of three components. First, the agoraphobia of choice, a panic-driven fear of a world without orders. Second, the economics of despair, when a bunk in a cell is the best business plan available. And third, the neural autopilot, a brain that only remembers prison reflexes and has no manual override. Now, the main question for you. In the story of a man whose freedom lasted 5 minutes, what played the decisive role? His personal, broken psychology, or the failure of the system that prepared him for it? Remember, your answer isn't just an opinion. It's a verdict that determines who we should fix first, the person or the machine that breaks them. Write one word in the comments, psychology or system. Let's see which one gets more votes.